Story 1. So my brother is the golden child and doesn't like me. He pretends he does when my parents are around, so I still have to go to his and his kids' birthdays and give them presents, or I'll look like a bad person. Because he's a golden child, you know he'll eventually screw up. And boy did he. He had his wedding during the pandemic in 2021 and didn't invite me, and he told everyone to keep the wedding a secret because I'm apparently volatile and my SIL is afraid of me, which didn't work. BC. Her mom likes me a lot. BC of my volunteer work with refugees. She came to our country from Asia in the 60s, so she kinds knows the difference between real kindness and her daughters. BS. So I knew this before the wedding. Anyhow, since this was the first time I could skip giving my brother a gift and having to drive several hours to do so, I told SIL's mom not to worry. This year, my darling golden child brother is too tired from remodeling his daughter's first apartment. He put 3 IKEA closets together. And they can't have my mom over for Christmas. My boyfriend and I are at his new apartment in Denmark, and my sister is in Tenerife. My mom called my sister and I yesterday that she plans to come over tomorrow. When I told her that I'm abroad, she was furious with me for keeping it a secret. How dare I? So I said, "What? Like you did with Arjun's wedding." And then the gaslighting started. Oh no, of course I knew. Everybody told me about it. When I asked why she never talked about the wedding, she kept twisting, turning, and changing the subject, and kept berusting me for abandoning her during the holidays. So I did the same. Kept repeating that we definitely talked about it, and she definitely knew. She lost it so badly that she handed the phone to my dad and did the fake crying and wailing thing. Now my brother is blowing up my phone and threatening me with slander. I really hope he does, because then I can call his MIL, who likes me, to the stand, rolling on the floor, laughing, rolling on the floor, laughing, rolling on the floor, laughing, rolling on the floor, laughing. As I'm a legal advisor for the local county government, I'm loving the free entertainment. Story 2. It's no secret Mel doesn't like myself, F38, or my spouse, her stepson, M36. And for all intents and purposes, we ignore her antics, and don't engage. She actively tries to keep her biological family away from us, as she hates reminders of FIL's martial history, but will go out of her way to try and play the long-suffering MIL. She lets FIL try to invite us to family gatherings in public for appearances, but cancels plans in private days later. We seldom meet, other than the annual company holiday party since FIL and spouse work for the same company. Here is where the meat of the story comes in. Now, the company party is always a huge event, with upscale food, an open bar, live entertainment, and a DJ with a dance floor. Everyone dresses up and shows out with the higher-ups and all that jazz. Everyone is drinking and having a good time. Everyone but my MIL and her belligerently hammered firstborn and his new GF. New GF is nice, but both seem dead set on keeping her away from us and actively trying to start fights with passive-aggressive comments. We don't react, we just keep laughing and partying it up since we know everyone there, and they don't. It starts to seem like a non-issue, with them seemingly leaving us alone until FIL approaches us, drunk and bursting with glee, as he asks us to please join him and his family for New Year's before he leaves for the night. While we gladly accept, I instantly knew what to say when I saw her marching up, pretending to be the doting MIL and telling us how she hopes we all get together real soon. All while hugging me tightly. I just wrapped my arms around that sour-faced woman, pulled her in tight, and whispered in her ear, "We already got the invite for New Year's, so your wish is granted. We'll see you then," and planted a loud kiss on her cheek. She hauls backwards, looking absolutely horrified, and ran out of there like a bat out of hell. The spouse is staring at me while I am just grinning like a Cheshire cat, and he just laughs when I tell him what I did. Sure enough, 3 days later, my FIL is calling us, apologizing for having to cancel because there was a family emergency they needed to leave town for. Skull FIL had forgotten that years ago FIL shared locations with us and never shut it off. They were home the entire night. I genuinely don't think we've ever laughed as hard either. Since then, we've also begun to use their same excuse of family emergency to politely turn them down. Story 3. Long-ish tale. The backstory matters for full effect, but TLDR at the bottom for those in a hurry. At a complex I lived at, a young kid in a badly restored 70s BMW, courtesy of mom and dad, was dating a nice young girl in the complex, and always sat in the parking bay opposite my place and ate fast food with his date, big spender. He always tossed the packaging out of the window onto the tarmac before heading off, despite the dumpster corral being 20 feet away from his car. This was a small condo community and was pretty much spotless all the time, and this shit was happening 1 to 2 times a week. I lost track of the number of times I picked it up. My bedroom overlooked the parking bay, and I saw them scarfing away there one day and went down to very diplomatically and politely ask them to put the garbage in the dumpster. How do you know it was me? I explained that it was beyond mere coincidence that every time I saw his car with them eating fast food there, when they left, there would be a pile of Taco Bell garbage right where he'd parked. I was very calm and respectful and just asked him to respect the neighborhood. The arrogant little shit came back with, "Are you watching me?" I calmly explained no, but his car was very distinctive and that I'd owned one myself when he was a mere zygote, and that mine was a lot better than the abject POS his dad bought him smiley face, and to please not flatter himself into thinking that I, 48M, would have the slightest interest in his personal activities beyond the littering issue. His GF was completely embarrassed throughout all this, especially when I asked her if she was okay with his practice of dumping shit out of the car window into our community. I ended the convo amicably by saying, "Here, I'm going to the dumpster right now, put your garbage in my bag," which he did. End of story, or so I thought. Okay, now to the revenge. 3 days later, I looked out of my window, and there on the tarmac lay more Taco Bell detritus. Only this time the car was still there. They must have both gone back to her place, leaving the sunroof open. I went and got the kitchen garbage, mostly peelings and smelly takeout leftovers, and not having my glasses, I somehow confused the sunroof of the car for the opening on our dumpster. You know, a Mr. Magoo kind of genuine mistake winking face. I also fucked with him further by reporting him to the condo management office, who promptly banned his shitty car from the premises, under threat of towing. Dr. Arrogant kid dating a girl in our complex mouthed off at me when I politely asked him to put his fast food trash in the dumpster 20 feet away, instead of throwing it onto the parking bay and leaving. He continued to do so until one day I saw his car parked empty with the sunroof open. I took our kitchen trash out and mistook his open sunroof for the dumpster. Story 4. This story takes us back to Christmas in the mid-2000s, when cell phone carries still charged per text message. Every year we celebrate Christmas with my wife's family. Our first Christmas as a married couple, we decided to start our own Christmas morning traditions. We let her family, including her adult sister, know that we would be up later in morning after we were done. We assured them we would still be coming over, just not the typical early 7 to 8 a.m. Christmas morning comes, and the wife and I are enjoying breakfast when my wife's phone dings. It was a text message from her sister. "When are you coming?" Wife texts back, "When we are done opening gifts." We continue to enjoy our morning, and not 5 minutes later her sister texts again, "When are you coming?" This continues for the entire morning, and by the fourth text we are annoyed and just start ignoring her. Around 9 a.m., we decide to pack it up and prepare for the 40-minute drive to her parents. As soon as we get in the car, I look at my wife and instruct her to text her sister. We are now in the car. I start the car and have her text again. We are now starting the car. I put the car in reverse, and you guessed it, text her. We are now backing out of the driveway. We are now driving down the street. We just passed mile marker 252. We just passed a blue car. Updates were sent, one by one, for the duration of our drive. By the time we arrive, her sister is visibly annoyed and says, "I don't have an unlimited text plan, so that cost me a lot of money." I respond, "Well, maybe next Christmas you'll leave us alone. Christmas morning has been peaceful ever since." Story 5. I posted this in a different thread and a bunch of people said it actually belongs here and might even inspire others. So here goes. Getting people to order extra on my MIL tab context. This happened 19 years ago, but I felt like it was still relevant. At 25 years old, my husband's mother and her husband, her brother, his wife, and 2 of their kids came to stay with us in California where we were stationed. As a young family, with a newborn and on an E5 salary, we were not rich by any means. We were using WIC even to supplement food. We offered our tiny home for everyone to stay. Still blacked out because I don't remember how they all fit. It was massively stressful on me is all I remember. My ex was the kind of guy that just socialized while I did all the hosting and cleaning. After a couple of days of trying to keep on top of the disarray, MIL announces that we should all go to this fancy breakfast place in Monterey. I was trying to get out of it because I was so tired and stressed and thought the hour alone would be good for me and my baby. Instead, the husband and his mother bullied me into going. So I went. I saw her brother and family stressing about the menu prices, and I could hear him talking to the kids, two teenagers that were always starving, about sharing a dish with each parent, which I knew meant the parents would only eat a bite or two and let the kids have the majority. They were a lot like how I grew up, where my parents sacrificed so much for us and just really happy to see California and have a place to stay. That's when it hit me. I announced loudly, "Cindy, not Mill real name, thank you so much for this wonderful breakfast you wanted to take us all to this morning. I am so grateful you wanted to treat all of us to such a special breakfast." The look on her face as she stumbled how to get out of paying for everyone. But she knew she couldn't because she was the one that forced us all to go. Her brother jumped in and said, "Oh, Cindy, we wouldn't have pushed back this morning if we had known that was your intention." Bam! Now she was on the hook. Then I mentioned how grateful I was for a large breakfast, so that maybe I didn't have to put lunch together and could nap with the baby that afternoon. She looked aghast. She was trapped. Everyone went big. Pancakes, omelets, extra sides of meat and potatoes. I even suggested people bring extras home to snack on and let me relax. Even my stupid husband agreed. When the bill came and the server did the customary, "Where do I set it?" I blurted out, "You can just give it to my Mill. She offered to treat us all this morning because she really wanted us all to go to her favorite breakfast spot." That's when it finally sank in to my simpleton husband what I did. He was furious at me when we got home, but I was well fed and ready to nap and do my own thing. LS. I left him years ago, but man, that was the first big moment where I stuck it back to him and his mother. The man I'm with now and his family are absolutely amazing, kind, loving, and supportive. Story 6. I used to live with my family on the 4th floor of a building. In my country, there's a rule that any building with more than 4 floors must have an elevator. Unfortunately, our building just barely missed the mark, so we had to climb all those stairs every single day. Below us lived an elderly couple who were, let's just say, not the friendliest. Everything annoyed them. Honestly, I kinda get it. If I were their age and had to drag myself up 3 flights of stairs every day, I'd probably be bitter at the world too. But these two? They took it to a whole new level. They complained about everything and everyone. They hated the neighbors across the hall because of the cooking smells. They hated the ones below them for playing music. But us? Oh, their complaints about us were so ridiculous they were almost funny. Apparently, we were the loudest stompers they'd ever encountered. "You bang on the floor so hard we fall out of bed," they'd yell. And yes, that's an actual quote. But the real kicker? The noise they were furious about wasn't coming from me, a teenager at the time, tiptoeing around quietly, or my mom, who was barely ever home. It was our cat. Yes, the problem was my young, featherweight cat. She'd zoom around the apartment like a little rocket. Sure, she was lively, but she mostly ran around during the day. At night, she'd cuddle up with me under the blanket and sleep peacefully. There's no way she was making earth-shaking noise, but the downstairs neighbors wouldn't let it go. They started calling the police. Obviously, nothing came of it, because, well, there was no actual noise. Then they started yelling at us whenever we crossed paths in the stairwell. It got so bad that I started dreading going home. And then one day, I had an idea, a simple, brilliant idea. Whenever I saw them and they started screaming at me or making threats, I'd just stand there for a moment, listening, quietly. And then, with the most polite, cheerful smile I could muster, I'd say, "Good morning." It threw them off every single time. Then I'd just keep walking. If they kept yelling, I'd turn back, smile even bigger, and say, "Have a great day." And this became a routine. The next day and a few days later, when we'd cross paths again, I'd see them bracing themselves, glaring at me, and I'd still go with, "Good morning!" It drove them absolutely insane. Now, in a building without an elevator, if we met at the bottom of the stairs, we'd end up climbing the whole way together. And me? Oh, I'd make the most of it. Every few steps, I'd turn back, flash them another sunny smile, and say, "Good morning," waiting for an answer. They, of course, would hurl insults and profanities at me the whole time, but they had no choice. They had to keep climbing with me. And let me tell you, I was having the time of my life. This went on for years, 3 or 4 years to be exact, until, well, they passed away. And no, I don't feel guilty to them. I never said a single mean word to them. All I ever said was, "Good morning," and "Have a nice day." Harry. If they'd ever responded with anything even remotely civil, if they'd said one "good morning" back, I would have stopped. But they didn't. So, I kept going. Honestly, it amuses me to no end that you can literally kill someone with kindness. Story 7. Background. I live in an area where I cannot commute in the winter because of the volume of snow on the roads, and my regular job is a city over, so I snowbird there and spend winter in town with my family. So I was supposed to have a job interview. Nothing fancy, a chain pizzeria named after a game piece. I apply online and get an interview scheduled. So I show up today and the conversation goes like this. Picking up an order? No, I'm X. I'm here for an interview at 1 p.m. Daytime driver? It was for customer service. Well, we're only looking for a day driver, so it's that or we're not hiring. Cool, somebody should have told me that. Bye. So I left, went home, made a fake profile under one of my many emails, and placed an order just big enough to not meet their prepay requirement by pennies. Her name popped up on the tracker too. Enjoy making all that food you're gonna have to give away or throw out, bitch. Story 8. I divorced my ex when our son was 6. I had primary custody, but I shared with his dad because it's the right thing to do for my son. Let's call my son Mario. My ex married a new lady. Let's call her Peach. She is very much a homophobic Christian. Peach is a total bitch to Mario and told him that she can't love him unconditionally as a stepchild. This nearly destroyed Mario. It took years to help him recover. Peach was rarely nice to Mario, but his dad, Bowser, is still his dad. We went through therapy to discuss how Peach treated Mario. Things were better for a little while, but of course, it went bad, then got worse. Needless to say, I absolutely despise Peach. When Mario was 8, he was recognized as a Citizen of the Month for his entire grade level and was going to receive the award during a school program. Parents were invited to attend and the auditorium was packed. Bowser wasn't able to attend, so Peach went to represent the family. I, biological and custodial mother, am sitting next to Peach waiting to root for Mario. I thought it was important to show a united front of support. Mario gets called to the stage for his award and is just beaming and dancing. I loved his smile and excitement. He was running from the stage to give me a hug, and Princess Peach stepped in front of me to get a hug first. Mario looked confused but went with it. I was livid. By a miracle of the universe, I was able to think fast. I gave my son a quick hug, then went in to hug Peach. I then kissed her on the lips and said very loudly, "I am so proud of our son." She turned 50 shades of red. I was so happy to embarrass her in such a way. Mario thought nothing much of it, but the parents in our section of the auditorium definitely just saw two women hug and kiss. That was 10 years ago and I still giggle to myself for my epic actions. TLDR, kid gets award. Homophobic stepmother tries to get hugged first during presentation, so birth mom kissed her on the lips in front of everyone. Edit. I do not consider kissing, peck, sexual assault. If you do, that's fine. I have been assaulted, and this is not even close to the same thing. Story 9. Note. All the people in this story are lovely humans who can occasionally be thoughtless. Internalized misogyny is the real enemy. My in-laws are visiting for Christmas. Marriage. I am working a half day today and was planning on taking our toddler to daycare because mother-in-law usually has a ton of baking and wrapping to do at our place in preparation for the big day. And since we pay a huge percent of our income towards childcare, we should use the service. This would still allow us to have 5 full days altogether. I figured the adults all to be highly productive while kiddos and I were out, and nobody would have to wrap presents until 2 a.m. on Christmas morning. When I relayed my plan, I immediately got hit with, "But we came ALLLLL this, WHHHAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA reality set in. Her, you're still going to work? Me, yes. ML, well, who will watch kiddos? I shrugged. There are 3 adults plus husband in the house. It's fine. ML, but won't it be a lot of work for husband to watch kiddos all day? Me, it's no big deal, but kiddo is a very busy toddler these days. I am sure they'll wear each other out and have a blast doing it. ML, well, I was counting on help wrapping. Me, I canceled daycare already. I guess you'll need to make do. Now I am in my ultra-quiet office, drinking an eggnog latte, and soaking in the last peaceful moments I am likely to get before the new year. Story 10. Last night I needed to charge my FEV at a grocery store. The charger was in use, but the charging space opened up and I snagged it. So I'm sitting in my car, freezing my ass off, when a customer pushes her cart between my car and the one using the charger. I was watching closely because I had little else to do, and I wanted to know if they dented my car. The person wedges the cart between the charger cable and my car, lifts one bag and a baguette out of it, and walks away. They just keep going, and I see them get into a car several spots away. Mind you, they passed one cart coral walking from the store to my spot. Their car was only a few spots away from another cart coral. I was miffed. I got out of my car, took the cart, and rolled it behind their Mercedes S-Class. It's about 4 feet away. I waved and walked back to my car. About 2 minutes later, I see the cart rolling across the lot as the Benz backed up. Oops, not actually my intention. Sorry, not sorry. Story 11. I get this story may be a bit extreme for the level 1 was wronged, but I figured I would post it anyway. I was exiting a Culver's and crossing the parking lot when a red Audi came out of the drive-thru as I started walking out. I want to add that there was a clearly marked crosswalk in the parking lot for people exiting the restraint on foot. He started honking at me to move out of the way when I was crossing before he even moved forward. This crossing zone was stretched, which I meant I spent a lot of time in his path. Normally, I would have just moved out of the way, but he kept honking at me like he had the right of way because he was in a car. To give you some context, I work for a mechanical company in the area, and I often make it a habit to stash unused screws in my coat pockets to throw away later or use on another project. So, feeling malicious, I reached into my pocket and put my hand behind my back and dropped them onto the pavement. By this point, I was at honk 5, so I darted to the other side so the idiot could get by. Once he did, I quickly picked up 3 screws from the pavement so I didn't give anyone else any flat tires, and I got in my car and left. Maybe a block down the road, the guy was pulled over with his hazards on and was out of his car looking at his front left tire. It felt like blowing him a kiss, but I did not want to add insult to injury, and honestly, I really did not want to give him any ammunition against me since I was driving a company truck with my company's name on the side. Story 12. Working under a toxic, micromanaging boss can feel like a slow descent into madness. Every task, no matter how small, is subject to scrutiny. Every email is critiqued. Every idea is dismissed, unless it aligns with their vision. If you've ever been in this position, you know the unique frustration of having your competence questioned at every turn. That was my life. Until, one day, I decided enough was enough. My boss, whom we'll call Mark, was the quintessential micromanager. He hovered over everyone in the office, demanding daily reports and nitpicking them for typos instead of substance. Deadlines became irrelevant because Mark would rewrite everything himself anyway. Meetings felt like interrogations, with him pacing the room and asking questions that made us feel like children caught misbehaving. At first, I tried to adapt. Thousands. I thought maybe his constant meddling was a reflection of his own anxiety, so I started giving him more updates, thinking transparency would build trust. It didn't. Instead, it gave him more opportunities to criticize. If I sent him an email about a project, he'd reply with a list of corrections. So long it would have been easier to start over. If I took initiative without consulting him, I'd get a lecture about following proper channels. The breaking point came during a team presentation. I had spent weeks preparing, crafting a detailed proposal I was proud of. But as I stood in front of the room, ready to speak, Mark interrupted me less than 2 minutes in. He dismissed my work, claiming it was off target, and took over the presentation, flipping through my slides as if they were his own. My colleagues avoided my gaze, and I stood there, humiliated. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark's behavior wasn't just annoying, it was sabotaging the team's morale and productivity. I realized I had 2 choices: continue being a victim of his tyranny, or find a way to expose the flaw in his approach. I chose the latter. Mark's greatest weakness was his need for control. He believed he was the smartest person in the room, and that the team couldn't function without his input. So I decided to use that arrogance against him. I started by following his instructions to the letter, but only in the most literal sense. If he asked for a daily update, I'd send him an exhaustive email detailing every trivial task I did, from answering emails to refilling my water bottle. If he wanted to review a project, I'd include so many drafts, notes, and supporting documents that it took hours to sift through. My colleagues joined in, flooding his inbox with a tidal wave of unnecessary information. Mark began to buckle under the pressure. He started missing meetings and delaying his feedback because he was too busy trying to keep up with the mountain of updates. The very control he craved was now consuming him. One day, Mark called me into his office. He looked exhausted, his desk buried under stacks of papers and reports. This is too much, he said, rubbing his temples. You don't need to send me every little detail. Oh, I replied innocently. I thought you wanted to stay on top of everything. I just wanted to make sure you had all the information you needed. He stared at me, realizing he had been outmaneuvered. For the first time, I saw a flicker of humility in his eyes. He mumbled something about delegating more and dismissed me. From that day forward, Mark's behavior began to change. He loosened his grip on the team, trusting us to handle our responsibilities without constant interference. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Old habits die hard. But the overwhelming flood of micromanaged details had taught him a valuable lesson. Control without balance leads to chaos. Working under Mark never became a dream job, but it became bearable. And more importantly, I learned something about myself. I learned that standing up to a bully even in subtle ways, can shift the power dynamic. I learned that sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is to let them experience the consequences of their own behavior. If you're stuck with a toxic boss, know this: you have more power than you think. Sometimes it's not about confronting them directly, it's about finding their blind spot and letting them trip over it. Story 13. I was in town yesterday with my 24-year-old daughter. We were stood near Christmas stalls and Christmas music was playing. I started to dance. Nothing rumbustious, just a bit of hip sway and shoulder jig. I wasn't the only one feeling the groove, and one or two others were giving it far more large than me. My daughter looked mortified and asked me to stop. I didn't, because 18 years previously, whilst I was cooking lunch, she and her friend ran around our back garden screaming, "Fuck you, you fucking fuckers," along with several other phrases they had apparently recently learned in the school playground. I found out about it the next day from my neighbor. The neighbor also told me that at the time she was sitting in her garden with several elderly relatives, and then I recalled that 3 years after that event, whilst supposedly playing Mario Kart in her newly carpeted and curtained bedroom, my daughter and the same friend wedged pens, nibs out, threw the grill on her desk fan, and turned it on at high speed. I therefore felt it was only appropriate to ramp up the dancing and to also sing. Story 14. My son parks on the street and stepped in dog poop on his way to the front door a few months ago. There's a lady who regularly walks her dog through our neighborhood and lets him poop anywhere he wants and doesn't pick it up. My son observed this a few days later and surreptitiously followed her home. He then collected all the poop from our litter box for about a month and put it in a Ziploc bag. He put it in her mailbox. He dumped out the Ziploc bag with a note that said something like, "You leave me your dog shit and I'll leave you my cat shit." I'm sure she has no idea who did that, but I'm hoping we won't have to worry about her dog any longer. 15. Okay, so when we were like 6, my sister wanted to watch Paranormal Activity with my older siblings. They told her no, obviously, but she watched anyway. In an extremely unexpected turn of events, she gets scared and turns to me to quell her fears. So she forces me to sleep with her, not like that we ain't from Alabama, 'cause she's scared. I say no 'cause I like my bed, so she uses her special attack, annoying and begging me until I give in because I'm tired. SNDA pushover. She pushes me to the edge of the bunk bed, her hair strangles my face, her scent assaults my nostrils, and she farts because she thinks it's funny. I barely got any sleep that night, or the night after, and after, and after, and after. I told my mom about her forcing me to sleep in her bed. She stopped for a few days and then forced me again. I tossed and turned. She persisted. Not sure how long it went on, but it felt like a few weeks to me as a kid. I was getting desperate. I needed to escape my soft, sweating, strange-smelling prison. My wife and kids missed me. The home-cooked meal on the stove was getting cold. I needed to do something. I pissed the bed with her in it. I'm not sure why that was my first idea. This has to be the last straw. This will get me out. Tonight I'm a free man. I am FRE. She forces me to sleep in her bed the next day, and the next, and the next, and the next. She eventually quit. Thank God. But to this day, she watches scary shit, gets scared, and has to sleep with the light on. Still love her though. Story 16. So I came across an old prank video about growing alfalfa inside a computer keyboard, and then suddenly I had a perfect idea. My HR coworker unnecessarily overworked 2 interns. Because internship in America is like 21st century version of indentured servitude, and I didn't like her overall bossy power trip nonsense. Before Thanksgiving break, I got her keyboard keys temporarily removed and installed pieces of damp tissues for breeding ground, and then planted alfalfa seeds. Then slowly put back all keys, LMAO. And few days later, the whole keyboard started to look like a miniature alfalfa farm. When she came back from Thanksgiving vacation, she freaked out and cussed inside an office. I knew several cameras didn't work, so I knew several blind spots, lol. Okar. She was so angry she told everyone about the prank. Everyone laughed at her, and an old janitor said, "Maybe it's because we already know you're an a-hole now." And after that day, she stopped that power trip thing. LL. Story 17. As an adult, I'm still petty. But when I was a kid, I used to love singing. At the top of my lungs. Any song, I'll sing it. Now, hitting notes was a different story. Some I could, but not Celine Dion. To annoy my siblings, I would wait until after dinner when we were all together and start singing just to annoy them because they would tease me. We weren't allowed to fight or argue because it was mealtime, so we had to get along. If you caused an argument, straight to your room. Anyway, teenage me. I found out my dad had cheated on my mom because she was crying when I'd come home from school. My dad was in their room talking to his girlfriend on his phone. I sat in the living room and sang his favorite song from his favorite singer, Elvis Presley. I changed every lyric to Love Me Tender, most of them with Love Me Cheater, I love you back, I know you'll rot in hell. Now my dad had a temper, and I knew I was gonna get a whooping. Didn't care. He yelled at me to shut the $5 atin up. I didn't. Kept singing and laughing. Then he yelled, "If you like singing so much, go sing to the toilet bowl." I did like singing so much, so I sang all the way to the bathroom, opened it, locked the door, sat down, and sang as loud as I could into the toilet bowl. Then paused and yelled out, "I'm here now. What else did you want me to do?" I'd never seen my father so mad. When he yelled from the other side, "Why was I acting like this?" I calmly replied, "Well, you told me to. I was fine singing in the living room." He still hates me to this day, because according to him, I ruined that song. Do I care? Absolutely not. Story 18. When I was around 12 or 13, a lunch aide in my junior high school started calling me Red. This was in New York, where there were quite a few redheads in my school. But I had come from Kansas, where I had been the sole redhead in my entire school, K through 6. So I'd gotten a lot of abuse over my hair, and really wasn't up for more of it. So I asked him to stop calling me that. Now you'd figure that an adult would be more mature than a kid, but not this guy. He made a point of calling my name more often. "Bye, Red. Welcome back, Red." Multiple times per lunch period. This went on for a few weeks. Then I realized I could do the same. He was an Italian guy who still had most of his hair, though it was clear that wouldn't be true for long. I knew calling him Baldy would be too far, but his hair color was brown, so, "Welcome back, Red. Good afternoon, Brown." I used his name every time he used mine. He either didn't notice or pretended really well not to notice the first few times. Then he called me up on it, and he was really angry. He told me that wasn't his name. I noted Red wasn't my name. He said that was different. I asked how. He said he'd report me to the principal. I replied, "Go ahead." He told me to go away, and he never spoke to me again, and I never spoke to him. Story 19. My crotchety old man of a neighbor has harassed multiple families out of this neighborhood over the years, had been trying to do the same to me for the first few years I lived here, including calling the police for everything, like my grass being an inch too tall, one's face with rolling eyes. I've lived here for 9 years, and this is the story of how I finally got him to leave me alone a couple years ago. So my final straw was he put up a camera on his privacy fence on his deck that pointed directly into my backyard and refused to move it. He also threatened to shoot my dogs that never were outside alone, and always either on a leash or in the backyard with me. Game on, bitch. I finally had enough. I proceeded to sign his address up for every possible spam mail/mailing list I could find. The Satanic Church, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Playboy, tons of other porn mags, and lots of other places that would scare an older religious couple, plus tons of other mailing lists. I spent like 5 hours just signing his address up for random mailing list shit. I then had one of those anonymous 5-pound boxes of elephant shit sent to his house, and I know it got there because I was off work the day it got delivered. I feel bad that the poor mail lady had to have that in her truck for any amount of time in the middle of a heat wave in July in MO, but that was a sacrifice I was willing to make. I watched her carry it like it was a bomb to my neighbor's porch and practically throw it at their door. Stepped out into my carport to spy when my neighbor went to pick it up and heard their reaction. It was priceless. I then got crafty, went to Wally World, and picked up a little corrugated metal sign that was like 3 feet by 2 feet from the craft department, as well as some of those wooden letters, spray paint, and construction glue. I proceeded to set up shop in my carport at like 11 at night, and that is only about 10 feet from his bedroom wall. All the houses are the same design on my street, so I know the master bedroom is on the wall closest to my house. And absolutely blast Avatar, a Swedish metal band that's awesome, at top volume, with the speaker pointed at his house while crafting my little sign. I can see through the trees and between the houses to the next street over that you are required to take to get to my street, Dead End Street, and kept an eye out until I saw a cop car coming. Turned off my lights and music and went inside for like 20 minutes. The cop didn't even knock on my door because when he got there was no noise complaint to act on lol. Now, after he left, I got back to crafting and blasting music. I made a sign that said FUCK-OFF, and once all the spray-painted letters and glue was dry, I hung it from an old swing set frame and pointed it at his camera that was watching my backyard. And to deal with the camera, well, you want to be a creepy fuck. Okay, I got you, boo. I waited until like 1 a.m. the next night, and then stripped down to nothing but my panties, and stood in my backyard and stared at his camera for like 15 minutes straight in nothing but my undies. I don't think he enjoyed the view of my fat ass and tits, lol. The camera was taken down the next day. I haven't heard a peep from that fucker or gotten the cops called on me for nonsense since. Story 20. A while back, before cars came with GPS and before the Google Maps app, we got around with printed maps. My job at the time involved a lot of travel. MapQuest, or maybe it was Bing Maps, would let you choose the type of route. One choice was fastest. Another was shortest distance. We always chose fastest because we have stuff to do. Well, the travel department decided they would only reimburse for the shortest route. In some cases, the shortest route took literally twice as long, sometimes even more. Okay, fine. You'll only pay for the shortest route, so that's how long the trip will take. Oh, we all drove the fastest route, but we built in time based on the shortest route to have a snack or shop or whatever. This ended up with an increase in overtime because it was taking oh so long to get to our destinations. BTW, our bosses thought the new policy as BS and were behind our rebellion. After a couple of months, they realized the overtime expense far exceeded any savings in travel reimbursements. The policy was changed to fastest route within a few months. Story 21. I live in Florida, and Hurricane Milton, the 9th of October, was devastating for my community. During the storm, my neighbor's tree went down into my yard, destroying a fence and landing on my pool enclosure. There was damage, but it was limited. These things happen, and that's why insurance exists, and I immediately submitted a claim. The community was without power, internet, and very limited cellular coverage in the following days. But work began restoring the community. My neighbor came over to my house on day 2 of the aftermath to apologize for the tree and informed me that they had hired a licensed and insured arborist. According to the neighbor, the arborist wanted to start on the top side of the tree, which was currently in my yard, so he would be out the following day to meet with me and give me a quote. I thought this was great as it meant I didn't have to search for one myself. The following day, the arborist met with me, gave me a price, and I told him that before he starts work, I would have to check with my insurance to make sure he was covered. Not pleased with the delay, he told me that he was going to start on the neighbor's side. Growing up on a farm, having used chainsaws, I told him how bad of an idea this was. He shrugged and left my property, leaving his business card with the words insured, honest, creative, as well as what he lists as a license number. A few hours later, while my wife was outside cooking on a camp stove, day 3 of no power, the chainsaws begin. He makes a straight cut, I call him, yelling, saying I can already see the pool enclosure beginning to buckle. He continues. I tell my wife to get inside and begin recording on my phone. The moment he moves the trunk of the tree, the side of the tree in my yard catapults. The majority of the pool enclosure collapses. The retaining wall breaks. The in-ground pool cracks. The roof buckles. And I am left with over $300,000 in damages to my backyard and home. Livid, I call him, both to say, I told you so, and also to demand his insurance information. He says he will email it to me immediately, and it is available on his website, but with very limited internet, that was impossible. I tell him to airdrop it to me, turn on my airdrop, and wait. Text him, refresh the airdrop time, call him, text him, nothing. He blocks my number. Something I noticed that evening when wireless data networks weren't as stressed is that the website on his card isn't active. I also note that his LLC is expired, he doesn't have a license, and therefore cannot have insurance. He also got arrested in August of 2012 for beating his wife, driving away with the kid in the car, then abandoning the kid in the car so that he could purchase some crack cocaine. Suing him? No, he doesn't have the money to pay for any judgment, and I am more interested in making sure no one else uses his services when the region is just trying to recover. I buy his domain. I buy the domain of his first and last name. I buy domains for variations of his business name. I buy the domain to his mother and father's, real estate agents, names. I build a website in 2 hours that details my glowing review of his character, his work, his arrest, his lack of business credentials and insurance, and the damage he did to my house, which all 15 domains route to. Theoretically, he could get a new LLC, right? I thought of that. Aside from the entire rebrand effort he would have to do, branded truck, shirts, business cards, etc., I wrote a script that crawls the state corporate registration listing using his name and automatically purchases the domains and variations of any new corporation names he registers or is an agent/officer of. Over the past 2 months, over 700 locals have visited the site. My website is the #1 result on Google if you search for his business, his name, or his parents. Here, he has stopped posting on his Facebook page, and his phone line has been disconnected. Hopefully he has switched career paths. As for legalities, I don't want money for the domains. They are not for sale, and were well worded to only speak to what occurred. TLDR. Neighbors hired a crackhead arborist that does $300,000 plus of damage to my house. I purchased the domain of his business, his name, his parents' names, and many more so, that everyone is routed to my glowing review of his services. Story 22. So this takes place when I was fresh out of high school. It was payday, and my coworkers and I all went to the bank to cash our checks. As a goof, we got most of our cash in $100 bills. After, we all went to Ruby Tuesday for lunch. From the get-go, it was pretty clear the waitress didn't care for us. She rushed us for our orders. It took forever for our food to get to us. She never refilled our drinks, and just generally ignored us. All the while, she was all sweetness to the older patrons she was serving. I can only assume it was because we were all teens, or slightly older, in work clothes, and wouldn't be giving her a decent tip anyway. When we finally get her to bring the check, we pull out our wallets and pretend to all we have are 100s. Boy, did her eyes light up, and she was just as sweet as can be. She was all too happy to get us change so we could split the tab, asking us if we needed anything else and whatnot. Alas, the damage was done, and only a shiny new penny was her tip. If she'd just treated us decently, we would have tipped generously, as we always did when we went places. Story 23. I saw a post talking about a petty Christmas present. Reminded me of one year. I must have been 5 or so. My middle brother wrapped up some switches for me for Christmas. Of course, I was feeling and shaking packages, trying to figure the gift out. And when I picked up that one, I told my dad this was switches. Dad told me to open it and take them out. We then put my jump rope into the wrapping and back under the tree. Come Christmas Day, and we start opening presents. I get to the one from my brother and pull out the jump rope. Ka! And yelled, "Thanks you," and ran to give him a hug. He was so shocked that the switches were not in there. He flipped the rocking chair he was in over, which made it just that much funnier. I never told him that Dad and I did that to get back at him for being mean to me with the present he wrapped. Update. I am surprised and people not understanding switches. I guess it is a more cultural thing, but to clarify, a switch is a branch from a bush, usually in the backyard, or a small limb from a tree, that you were sent out to get when you did something wrong and were going to be punished. This was back in the 60-70s. You went to pick it and bring it back to the parent figure. Gave you time to think about what you did wrong. Update 2. I guess I need to explain the punishment was doing wrong, getting caught, being sent to pick the switch, and bring it back, and as someone mentioned, the first one was not right, so you went back to get a better one. By the time you picked the first one, you were crying your eyes out. Then there was the lecture of, "You disappointed me," not being beaten with it. I can only remember one time the switch actually attempting to be used on me. I was jumping around in a circle, screaming and crying. Dad came out and told Mom to stop. I was scaring the people in the country store my parents owned. No abuse, promise. Story 24. I had a bully in high school who made my life hell. 15 years later, I was digitizing a graduation VHS tape for a school reunion. I saw him in the video, so edited him out. No more him getting his diploma. I either completely cut or obscured with a dot. Now all he is a dot. It's a small thing, and I doubt they'll ever see it, but still. Edit for context. I was a bullied kid. It was high school, and I started carrying around a calendar in my duffel bag. Instead of hours of work, I tracked every day I was told to kill myself by kids at school. It was so common that I wondered if it had become a new greeting. Maybe it's not normal to keep track of how many times people tell you to go kill yourself, but what else was I supposed to do? Not keeping track? I met Bob in class because he sort of had a bad reputation too, and I had worse. So I asked Bob if he wanted to hang out. He asked if I wanted to come back to his place and play Doom. I said yes. I went over there the first time, and we played Doom. Great game. It's fun. About a week goes by, he asks if he wants to come over again. I go over there the second time. We play Doom. Maps and mods. Great game. It's fun. About a week goes by. He asks if he wants to come over again, and I think I've just made a friend. I go over there the third time, and instead of playing Doom, he says he wants to talk. He says he'll show me his if I'll show him mine. He said that he had felt some sort of connection to me from the very beginning. He's seen me scribbling in my book. I guess broken? Consent's broken? He wanted to show me his book, so he leans over from his computer, and in the little side drawer he pulls out this little black book and hands it to me. I turn it around and I open the first page, and it says, "My hit list." There was a list of 20 students, and he wanted to know if there were some names that I wanted to add. For a moment I couldn't say a few. I could have named quite a few, but I didn't want them dead. We start talking, and I ask him, "So this guy right here, third from the top, Greg, a bully football guy, should he have to die, or is that more like a jellyfish in the face?" "A what?" he asked. A jellyfish in the face. It'll sting a lot, I responded quickly. Well, yeah, maybe. He began to think about it. And this second from the bottom, does Nick have to die too? Or is that more like a Nancy Kerrigan situation? I probed at him. What? He nervously said. A lead pipe before practice? Take his dreams away. Never gets to be a star. I guess. And I keep at it. I keep negotiating their freedoms, making him think of bad things, instead of pushing forward with making the ultimate bad thing happen. I'm getting them into purgatory instead of hell. We were friends for about a year, and then he turned on me after he owed me money for doing his homework. Then we didn't talk for about 3 months. One day he told classmates and a teacher that I had a hit list, that I asked for his father's gun, and that I wanted to shoot up the school. This was his whole plan. And the worst part? They believed him. This son of a bitch gave me his dream, his identity, and I never wanted it. But now I had to carry it. I was pulled into the office, meeting with the principal. They wanted to know why I had a hit list. They wanted to know why I would want to kill people. I told them I didn't have one. I wasn't a snitch, but apparently Bob did it first, so I told them it was Bob. They didn't believe me. They loved Bob's mom, who worked at a different school, so she couldn't have had a bad kid. So I pulled out my calendar and I gave it to them. It said bold letters. How many times I've been told to kill myself. In the days there were little tally marks. Some had more than others. They looked at it for a long period of time, like I had done something wrong with it. Ultimately, the calendar got me out of trouble with the principal. No police reports. They sent me to a counselor for a long-ass time, though. We probably both should have gone. I'd like to say I got fewer death threats after that. I really would. That the fear of me would have created a shield to hold others at bay so I could have a moment to breathe. But they met perceived hostility with actual hostility. They could have killed it with kindness, but they'd rather try to kill me, drive me to suicide, like I was a pain piñata they wanted to pop. I just got better at living with hatred. There's 3 things I would say you could learn from this. 1. Be careful with your friends. 2. Be careful when you track time. People don't always understand the nuances. 3. You might end up in hell trying to save people from it. Eventually, it came out it was Bob. But that was a long and horrible time for me. His lie outran the truth, and I don't know if the truth reached everyone. But yeah, all these years, no apology. So if he becomes a dot, he becomes a dot. A period at the end of a sentence. Story 25. I was reminded of this when me and my mates were talking about our old schools. Please let me know if this should be in pro-revenge also. Because while it was petty, I feel it would also work in pro-revenge. Years ago, I was in a local international school before studying in a private school. This school was quite abusive and strangely segregated, in a sense that foreign students were with other foreigners and locals with locals. While I was born in the local country, I am quite foreign now. I was unfortunately put in the local class, and 90% of the class subjects were the local language, and they claimed they were international. Anyways, the experience was okay, not the best. I had a classmate who was a typical busybody. She always snitched on others, and always acted tough and bitchy. She also never ever listened, and became verbally abusive to anyone that refuses to help her. She had it out for everyone, honestly. We had a small project which made us need to write an essay as well. The essay had to be 200 words. This is important. My classmate didn't really register the essay part but the project itself. Note, everyone hated her. Again, important. It was nearing the end of the class, as well as nearing the end of the project. She started to notice everyone writing and started asking. I could see she started to panic, because while we had to write the essay, the word count was important, duh. She ran classmate to classmate, no response, the teacher, and her response was, well, you should have listened closely instead of slacking. Then she came to me. Oh, Pete, please, you're my only hope. What is the word count for the essay? I stared at her menacingly and told her, no, it's not word count this time. It's letter count, 200 letters. Don't screw it up. She didn't even thank me and ran to her desk. We finished, and I could see everyone having a near-complete page of their essay, including mine. Whereas her, on the other hand, was short. Come the next day of class, my teacher walked to the front and loudly announced, see, this is why you should always pay attention. She called up my classmate and said, I specifically asked for a 200-word essay, not 200 letters, do you understand? And she wasn't saying this calmly, she said it really angry. She continued, I am going to make you rewrite this essay, but make you write 2,000 words till the end of the day. You only have break time to do it. And I don't care if it takes you all night. If you even write less than 2,000 words, I will make you write 3,000 words in a new page. Same rules apply, and you have to do it on these 2 sheets of paper. My classmate began to cry and was given the 2 sheets of paper. Whenever she could, she would write, but only the teacher yelling at her to pay attention. By the time school was over, she was still there, sitting and writing. She cried, sad. In the end, I think she stayed until 9 p.m., but didn't finish the essay. She never bullied any one of us again after that, but was quite ostracized even more after. TLDR. Tricked the class bully into writing 200-letter essay instead of 200 words, and she got called out and punished severely by the teacher. Story 26. This was over 30 years ago. My dad took me and my brother on a cruise ship. I think we were 12 and 10. There was a magician duo on board. They would play a show most evenings. And during the day, they would walk around the ship doing a few tricks. It was all the usual pulling a coin out of your pocket or guessing which card was hidden under your seat. One of them was kinda cool, but the other one was a bit obnoxious. And somehow they started to get a bit annoying. Like, you're having your dinner, and they come to your table and steal your watch or something. You're there trying to eat, and they would interrupt, seat at your table, pull coins out your plate. It was cool, but it was too much and a bit intrusive. So at one of the stops, we get a taxi, and Dad takes us to a joke shop. Like, not a laughable establishment, but a shop that sells funny stuff. We bought an exploding pen. Back on the ship, one of the magicians, the obnoxious one, was doing tricks on a red table, and there were about 10 people watching. Me and my brother approach him and go, "Hey, can we get an autograph?" Dude was quite chuffed and proud to get some attention. Then we hand him the pen and a piece of paper. When he pulled the lid off, boom! Way louder than we expected. He totally lost his composure. He was shocked, and he really didn't know what to say. But he ended up having a good laugh, along with the 10 people who were there. He never came back to annoy us at our dinner table, though. Story 27. So this was in boot camp years ago. A nice enough guy was always messing with people to pass time. It was harmless, at first, sometimes funny, but persistent, and always went too far in the end. One day he latches onto this black guy in my section. Now, nothing about his race, just his teeth, speech, walk, stuff like that. My guy laughed at first, then it wasn't funny anymore. He stays on my guy for about a week. Relentless. I had enough, and decided I would put this guy in his place, but had no plan. Long story short, it was dead of winter in Great Lakes, windows were open, fucking frigid, and got up in the night to go to the bathroom. I was walking back to my rack, and it hit me. I got it! I filled me mouthful of water, quietly went to this guy's rack, and spit the water into his boots. I then repeated this like 4 times in each boot. Went to bed, no one knew anything. Dude, the next day this guy was freaking out about ice/slush water in his boots. Company commander says to him, "That's hilarious, and what you get for fucking with everyone endlessly, and you're lucky that's all that happened. Now go jog the grinder." He never said a word to anyone ever again. Mission accomplished. Edit. The windows weren't open. Our barracks were small warehouses with near 100 people, so they cracked certain windows for airflow. Obviously the heat was running full blast, but it wasn't ducted, so there were deep disparities in temp based on your location inside, weather, etc. If the wind kicked up at night, it wasn't uncommon to wake up with frost on our wool blankets. Dude, ice would build up on the inside walls near the windows. That's just the winter weather there at times. Story 28. A thread in a other sub reminded me of this story. My wife used to work for a company. We'll call them Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing, because that's the name of the company. Anyway, my wife worked there for a couple years, and this lady I used to deal with when I was a deputy started working there. We'll call her Dinah, because fake names are dumb. I let my wife know how sorry I was for her because this lady is a nightmare and always complains about anything and everything. Well, when Dinah's first review came up, I believe she was 6 months in IIRC, she was admonished for taking 8 to 10 hours to complete work on a part, and the expected time to finish, set by my wife when she used to build that part, was 6 hours. She called my wife a liar and claimed it's not physically possible to build that part in 6 hours. Well, her supervisor knew my wife could build it that fast, so she set up a timer and had Dinah watch her as she built it. My wife decided she wasn't going to listen to any music that day and built that part as fast as she could. Dinah left very angry that day when my wife set a new time for the part. The new time was 4 hours. Tears of joy edit. A few people have pointed out my wife screwed herself and other workers over. Fair point based on what I wrote, but it wasn't all that bad. The company would have been thrilled if Dinah and everyone else would bring their times down to 6 hours. If they had, the place might still be open. Unfortunately, the other workers were unable to meet company standards and expectations. Being such a small town, they just didn't have any decent applicants to try to replace them with. Story 29. This happened about 10 years. I worked for a small manufacturing company. One of the people I worked with, William, he was one of those people who like to play the cliche, fun office pranks on people. Mess with your computer mouse, turn your phone volume up, change your background, rearrange your stuff, etc. Everyone mostly just ignored it and didn't give William the satisfaction that it annoyed you. Together. I asked my boss if could rearrange a shared cabinet to make it easier to get the stuff we need. He said go ahead and was very happy with the change. William hated that the closest was changed and complained about it for months. After that, his fun pranks played on me, got more and more annoying and took longer and longer to undo. Deleting software from my computer, changing settings, hiding stuff I needed to do my job. I complained to my boss about it, but he refused to do anything. I started doing small things back to him, but William couldn't handle them and would complain to my boss for hours about it. My boss pulled me and William into his office and said, the next time one of you pull a prank on each other, I'm sending you home with no pay for a day. After that, I set up a webcam at my desk and set it to record the 2 hours in the morning. William was there before I came in. Sure enough, after a couple weeks, I caught him going and messing with my computer. I showed my boss the footage, and he said he would have a talk with William, and he is serious about stopping the pranks. Since I knew my boss was not actually going to do anything, I executed the plan I had been saving that would drive William crazy. I had found out from one of my fellow employees that William cannot stand the song In Day Club by 50 Cent. I tested that theory one day, and sure enough, he launched into a rage screaming about how awful that song is and everything wrong with it. Thanks to William messing with my phone, I had learned that you could upload custom ringtones to the phone and set a passkey to lock people out of the setting menu on your phone. I was always the last one to leave on Friday, so before I went on vacation for a week, I set the ringtone of the phone to In Dat Club, changed it to max volume, and set a passcode so no one could change it but me. I get a call from boss Monday afternoon. He says he and the owner think it hilarious. Wasn't planning on asking for the code to get into the phone until after I got back to try and teach William a lesson. But William has been sitting in his truck in the parking lot for 2 hours, refusing to come in the building. William didn't pull any more pranks the rest of the time I worked there. Story 30. My kid is currently setting up his next semester's online college class schedule. That means that he is getting calls from numbers that aren't in his contacts, and he needs to answer. Unfortunately, that means he also picks up a scammer every once in a while. Unfortunate for them, that is. Today I got to witness the master in action. The call was to check on possible fraudulent activity on his checking account. First, he was super nice about it, thanking them for checking because he didn't make that purchase. And it's so great that they are being so careful during the holidays and all. All this was said at the speed of a 6-year-old after a dozen Christmas cookies. After that, he switched to gushing about how this person is really doing something so good and how he wants to get a job that really helps people too, which led to, hey, can I get a job like that? This was the first time he stopped talking since the initial, I'm calling because, and there was a very uncomfortable silence before the person evidently decided just to go ahead with their regular script. Kiddo, who is not a kiddo but sounds like one when he talks fast, decided that that wasn't going to fly and cut back in with, hey, that's not nice. I asked you if I could get a job like yours, and proceeds to give the guy a short lecture about being nice to strangers. The kicker, I'm telling my mom you were mean to a kid, you jerk. I thought you were nice, but you're not, and hangs up the phone. Dang, I love that kid. Story 31. Someone mentioned that there wasn't a lot of Christmas revenge stories in this subreddit, so to the person who said that this one's for you. Context. My younger brother decided to pull a prank on me and my family on Christmas morning. What did he do? He got us 3 big boxes, wrapped them up, and gave them to us. We opened up the wrapping paper, only to find absolutely nothing inside. Just empty Christmas presents. Since we knew it was a prank, we had a good laugh, but I wanted to get him back. The revenge. Last year during Thanksgiving, I told him that I overheard that Mom and Dad were getting him a new car for Christmas to replace his current junker. It was going to be a Toyota. He was stoked and really looking forward to his new car. Come Christmas morning, he got it all right. A toy Yoda. It was a stuffed baby Yoda doll that I found in a Target. Needless to say, we all had a good laugh that year. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. Thanks, guys. And for those who think I stole this story, Ghost, I can take a picture of the Yoda doll and prove you otherwise. Additionally, a detail I forgot to mention is that the idea for the revenge came from a similar story I heard on the radio driving to work one day. So yeah, maybe stop jumping to conclusions. Merry Christmas. Story 32. I get home early from work because I'm like that. Barely sit down and there's a loud knock at the door. I answer and a pissed off fellow tells me he hit my truck. Damn it, all to heck. I go out and yep, the mirror is busted on the work truck. His mirror is broken as well. Sucks, but not the first time in the 30 years I've been parking there. Now for the fun bit. Mr. Angry tells me that it's my fault for parking there. He points at the no parking sign a 1/2 a block away. The sign is for the busy intersection and only has an arrow on one side indicating that. When I point out legally parked or not, you can't hit cars. Again, he gets more angry and tries to make his case. So I state it's a company truck, so I have to report it. We need to go to the cop shop reporting center. Oh shit, I forgot to mention my mirror was already broken. It's a work truck and I park on a busy-ish road. Not the first time a work truck has been tickled. I've normally just told people in the past, thanks for being honest, and don't worry about it. My work truck is a tool, and I'm hard on tools. 2 hours later, say it in the voice. I have a police report and didn't get off early. Mo money. Mr. Angry is still convinced I'm wrong, which is why I wanted paper. The nice lady and I had a laugh when he left. Ooh, I'll probably go to the dollar store and hot glue a mirror onto the broken bit. I can't help but wonder if Mr. Angry has ever been wrong. Story 33. A month ago, my neighbor had their trees trimmed, giant spruces. A few days later, I took my garbage out and noticed a 6-foot pile of brush against my back fence, from the ground to the top of my 6-foot fence, and bulging all the way to the road. Huge branches and tons of pine needles. I texted her and asked what her disposal plans were, and she said she wanted to move it gradually. I said that was not okay, and I wanted it gone ASAP. I texted her again 2 weeks ago and was not so polite, telling her my property was not free storage for her. She also uses a section against my house to store random crap. We've had unseasonably warm weather here in Canada until today, when it is now -20. So I went home for lunch, saw the pile still sitting and full of snow, and likely mice, and proceeded to throw it all onto her small parking pad where she keeps her garbage bins. Hopefully she moves it before it snows and freezes more. I'm now awaiting the irate texts. Update. No texts. She started chatting with me while we were both doing yard work. I told her I put the branches back on her property, and then she asked if she could use my green bin to help get rid of it, because it will go faster. I said no, I keep my bin in my yard for when I pick up my dog's poop. That's it. Still entitled AF. She said if she sees my bin out and it's not full, she'll put some brush in it. Story 34. I know upstairs neighbors are usually the bane of all existence. I literally have no idea what my upstairs neighbor is doing every night at almost midnight exactly. But my downstairs neighbor is a true nightmare. I was warned about her when I first moved in, but oh boy did I underestimate her. If you are assembling furniture after 5 p.m., when most people like me get off work, she will bash her broom into my floor. If I walk on the floor of my bedroom at night, she will bang her broom on my floor. She has complained to my super that it sounds like he drops things at nights. One July 4th at midnight, she banged her broom on my floor because I walked to bed and stepped on the one creaky floorboard while I did. I stomped back, and then she sent her husband to literally scream at me for 3 minutes after I did that. Either way, she is wildly sensitive and majorly in need of a personality transplant. Luckily, I am moving out in the morning, or I guess in 3 hours more, like since it's 3:30 a.m. here. I have been cleaning and vacuuming all night, and around 12 o'clock she came up to yell at me. Luckily, I was taking some trash out while she did, and before she even got more than 2 words yelled out, I shushed her, then told her to speak to me in the morning. I am sure she has been tossing and turning all night just getting beyond ready to yell at me, but silly me forgot to tell her that I would be gone by then. Hope she pieces it together eventually, and I hope the next tenant isn't as introverted as me. She got quite spoiled living below a mathematician for 2 years. I am quite sure that finding someone who has as few guests and makes less noise will be quite hard to find. Story 35. Hey guys, I live in an apartment complex with a parking at the ground floor of the building. Bear in mind, this is my secondary residence. For the weekdays, I stay with my family about a couple hours away during the weekends. Anyways, my employer rented me a 3 BHK apartment in this building. Considering that they accounted for my entire family staying with me, which they don't, they stay at our own house a couple hours away. I'm given 2 parking spots in the building's parking lot. Normally, I only use one because I drive over Monday mornings and drive back during the weekends to see my family. The other spot is mostly unused, but there's more than enough spots in this parking lot for all the residents in this building. So given that my second spot is mostly unused, an opportunistic neighbor of mine decided to start using my spot because it's got better shade than her parking spot. I'll be frank, I didn't realize this until recently. Recently, however, I invited my mom to stay over with me for a week, and she came separately in her own car. To my surprise, when she arrived, she said that our second spot was already occupied. I inquired with the security, and sure enough, he checked the number plate of the car in question, and it belonged to my neighbor. So he called my neighbor to respectfully move her car into her designated spot. She didn't pick up the phone, So the security guard had to climb upstairs and knock on her door to bring her downstairs. Now here's where she turns into a total bitch. Instead of obliging, I'm not expecting an apology, which she is liable to give me. She starts arguing with the security guard. He said that he's following the rules, and he doesn't really have a say regarding this. She reluctantly comes down to the parking lot and gives me the nastiest death stare. She hesitates, but eventually moves her car to her spot so that my mom could park. Bear in mind, my mom is just waiting in her car all along for my neighbor to move her car anyways. My neighbor then continues arguing with the security guard. Bless him for actually listening to her. But we didn't stick around. Me and my mom went to our apartment to get on with our lives. When my mom was leaving to go back home, she was horrified to see that her car had been keyed up really bad. Now in that time frame, the only people that could have entered our parking lot is the security guards and our other neighbors. I'm on great terms with all my other neighbors, except the one mentioned in this post. So there's a lot of reason to believe that she was responsible for this incident. When my mom reported the damage to me, I was outraged. For absolutely no reason, my mom's car was damaged. It's not like we did anything wrong. We got back a parking spot that was rightfully ours. So of course, to teach this lady a lesson, I decided to damage her car. In the following days, I brought out my tools, and I left some really bad scratches on her front driver's side bumper. But I still felt that wasn't enough, so I decided to completely deflate 2 of her tires. I did this after I came back from work, under the pretense that I was checking on my own car. Sweet revenge was served. Needless to say, she was horrified the next day. She had to get her car towed, which I graciously saw over my balcony. And she was panicking because she was going to be extremely late to get to work. I smiled whilst watching this, almost feeling like a supervillain. But not really, because she deserved it. My neighbor probably knows it's me, but hasn't pulled a stunt back at me. And that's my story behind why you never mess with another person's car. Story 36. Part of my job involves calling a specific company several times a week to make sure they have correct information on files for our members. Usually the calls are pretty straightforward and take just 5 to 10 minutes. I called a few months ago and ended up with James ID number 4X. And he was one of those know-it-alls who makes life difficult for everyone. I'd give an ID number and the member's name, and he'd sigh and change the way the name was pronounced. William Smythe, and he'd pronounce the last E. Bain Johnstone, and he'd pronounce the last E. He thought he was very smart, but really, how annoyingly wrong can you be? Then when I'd tell him what I needed to update, he'd rephrase it into the exact same thing. So annoying. Really, if you hate your job that much, then find something else to do. A phone call that should have taken 10 minutes took 35. And at the end, I had to walk away from my desk to cool down. This morning I called and got James ID number 4X, and this is where the games began. I made him repeat things over and over again, gave him wrong numbers that didn't come up in my system. Oops, sorry, it's this number. I made him wait while I checked my computer for things that were on a notepad of me, so I didn't really need to check a single thing. He'd type in notes, and then I'd apologize and change the information. He was pissed and you could hear it in his voice, but I was sweet as anything and didn't change my way of communicating at all. At the end of the call, when he asked if there was anything else I needed, I said, "No, James, you were so much more helpful this call than the last time we spoke," and hung up. Was I on the phone much longer than needed? You betcha. So worth it. Can't wait to talk to James ID number 4X again. Story 37. So, this happened years ago, but it still makes me smile. I moved countries and was on a temporary visa for a while, which meant I couldn't get a proper role in my existing profession, where I was a fairly experienced sysadmin for a popular package at the time used by many corporates. So I filled in the time with IET Help Desk first-line support, and in one role, got a reputation amongst my peers for knowing this particular package pretty well. So I would get all those tickets. This was fine. I could usually figure the issue out way quicker than most of the guys, and if it needed something fixing behind the scenes, I would be able to let the local sysadmin know what the issue was for a quick fix. Win-win, right? No, the local sysadmin, let's call him AH, did not like anyone else in his little fiefdom and would go out of his way to avoid applying any fix I had suggested, usually meaning the poor end user would get back to me days later wondering why the issue was still not fixed. It was because AH had done something unrelated that would never fix the problem, as he would not accept the real fix from me. I started managing him by not giving the fix, but nudging him in the right direction, and hoping he would not take it as a challenge to his authority, but rather something I was too dumb to figure out, so he could victoriously win one over on me. I cared not at all if it got the job done. The contract came to an end soon enough, My proper visa came through, and I moved on and got a good role elsewhere, forgetting all about AH. One day, my new manager called me in to help interview a candidate for a role on our team. I walked in and was delighted to see AH waiting for us. He shook my manager's hand, then turned to me, and I watched as the recognition hit him, and he visibly sagged. I said nothing, and was in fact very chirpy and friendly, asked extra questions, and was generally fascinated by what he had to say, particularly around teamworking and people skills. He was sadly unsuccessful in his application, largely due to me telling my boss what a douche AH was. Immediately, the interview concluded. My favorite part was that all the way through the interview, we both knew he wasn't getting the job, but I got to make him sit through it anyway. And people say the universe doesn't care. Delicious. TLDR. Petty sysadmin regrets his life choice of being a douche to me when I get to choose whether he gets a job or not. Story 38. I used to be a fat kid. Most of my family is obese or have some health issues relating to it. Every time I tried saying I wanted to lose weight as a kid, my grandmother wouldn't leave the drive-thru until I got something. Hell, I couldn't save food for later because she made me eat it even if I was full or didn't want it. TBF was a picky eater. So then I had a whole lot of issues and got burns under my elephant titties and needed powder. When I finally got away from her, I had a diabetic scare. I worked out, and when she found out I was losing weight by accident, my mom let it slip. She said, "Heh, I give him a week." My mom then grilled her and told her I'd been going for a month. Those words are at me, and I eventually gave up. This year I got rejected and another diabetic scare, so I took it seriously. Years. Used to be 6 feet 2,300 pounds, and now 256 pounds. My back issues are gone, girls are talking to me more since I don't smell, and my personality got better. My mom lost weight too, and family members started noticing. My sister is currently going for it, since she got freshman 15 at her college. My aunt recently asked me what I did, and I'm overall in a great mood mentally. Guess who has diabetes and who probably doesn't? This guy! I am gonna get tested again. She's now staying over for God knows how long. Seeing her glare at me during her stay here brings me nothing but joy. My doctor told me to walk my imaginary dog and exercise. She has acknowledged my weight loss, but when people on the phone see me in the background of her calls, they start complimenting me and she gets quiet. All of a sudden, those words she used to ruin my motivation is now lifting me to new highs. Hatred and pettiness is the only thing motivating me. Take that, you chicken cutlet, ham-legged, circular sausage-filled, meat-sweat, full-speed waddling-looking ass. When weight loss is brought up, you try to make yourself invisible. But I see you. I'm scared of needles. And even entertaining the thought of being like you fills me with disgust. I know you're trying to sabotage me every day and glaring when I reject your food or I just fast after. I used to walk around shirtless out of uncomfortability, but now I occasionally do it to spite you. Make all the digs you want at me. I don't care. It means you are watching. Watching me, the firstborn grandson, your granddaughter, and my mom losing weight and seeing the misery on your face brings me joy. Doing something I know you failed at and mocked me for even considering as a kid is the only reason I'm excited for school, so I can go to my weightlifting class. You waddle while I can run. Stare. Stare and my smaller man boobs. Look at me walking without breathing heavy. Still no girlfriend though. Story 39. My dad was an abusive AH. But in addition to his physical and emotional abuse, he did things just to piss people off. So we grew up on homemade iced tea. My siblings and I, made the tea because my dad didn't. He barely held a job because he had a problem with authority. My dad would wait until we would fix a glass of iced tea, mix it with sugar, lemon, and ice, and sit down with it. Then he'd walk up and drink the entire thing, just guzzle the whole thing. Then he would complain about it. He'd say, "Too much lemon, not enough," or my favorite, "Too sweet." My dad was obese. Nothing was too sweet for him. Besides, why would he drink all of it if he didn't like it? Why couldn't he ask us to make him one? Sometimes we'd ask if he wanted a glass and he'd say no but drink ours anyway. He was just a dick. So one day I knew what he was going to do. So I used salt. My brother was watching me and looked at me like, "WTF? One." I just put my finger over my lips. Tea was still a little warm, so it was easier. The tea was more soluble. I mixed in that salt and then added ice. I sat down with a sandwich like I was gonna have lunch. Sure enough, my dad walked over and picked up my tea and started guzzling. He then ran to the sink and spit it out and coughed. He was yelling. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Too sweet?" I worked so hard not to burst out laughing. My brother was in the corner with his head down and shaking with laughter. My father glared at me. He never drank my tea again. Story 40 to 35 plus years ago. My sister had 5 kids. This involves the 2 oldest and the youngest. I am changing names for privacy. The two oldest were boys, Kurt 14 and Jeff 13. The youngest was a sassy little girl, Allie, around 20 months old. Kurt was kind and patient with Allie, and would read to her and play games. It wasn't constant, he had other things to do being a teen and all, but if he was around, he would make it a point to give her hugs and attention. Jeff, on the other hand, couldn't be bothered. He wasn't mean to her, but he was impatient. He would yell at her if she touched his things or went into his room. If she approached him with a book or toy, he'd tell her to go away. Allie adored Kurt and gravitated toward him while pretty much ignoring Jeff. For some reason, this annoyed Jeff, even though her didn't want much to do with her. One morning before school, Allie was in her high chair and my sister was packing lunches. Jeff came into the room to grab his lunch before heading out to the bus. "Hi, Kurt," Allie said in her sweet little sing-songy voice. Jeff stopped, looked at her with annoyance and said, "I'm not Kurt, I'm Jeff. Say Jeff." So she said Jeff at them. Satisfied, he grabbed his lunch, told his mom goodbye, and as he left, Allie sweetly said, "Bye, Kurt." Jeff stopped and again told her he was not Kurt, he was Jeff. She just smiled sweetly and said, "Okay." Allie continued the hi Kurt/bye Kurt routine with Jeff for several days, and he was very irritated by it. My sister asked her why she was calling him by the wrong name, and Allie giggled and said, "It funny, mama." My sister couldn't believe this sassy little toddler came up with this pettiness all on her own. Story 41. In my youth, I worked the evening shift as a dishwasher at a restaurant that did brisk business, both lunch and dinner. The dish machine they had was a giant conveyor type that was almost fully automated. You put the rack of dishes in and sent it on its merry way, and a few minutes later, everything exited all sparkly. The soap and sanitizer were pumped out of reservoirs, and all you had to do was keep feeding the machine with dishes, and it would do the rest. The day shift dishwasher was in the habit of leaving multiple tubs of dishes for the evening shift to clean before the dinner service had even started, and when we on the night shift complained that he was making more work for us, he started leaving even more. He was a difficult person to say the least. One night I had had enough. I conspired with my dishwashing partner to fix him once and for all. The first thing we did was shut the machine down early, so that he had about 10 tubs of dishes to do first thing in the morning. Then, after I had cleaned out the machine and shut it down, I went to the sink and returned with a bottle of dish detergent and poured it all over the inside of the machine. It was a clear liquid, so I knew if I left the machine open overnight, it would dry clear by morning and be practically unnoticeable. Next, I mopped the floor clean and then headed to the walk-in fridge and returned with a pound of butter. I took the cast iron grate off of the floor drain, and with the mop handle I stuffed the entire block of butter deep into the drain and replaced the grate. The trap was now set. In the morning, that guy had to process all those dishes in order to get ahead of the lunch rush. He started up the machine as usual, and gradually the excess soap I added the night before began to do its job. Now, I was not there to see it, but I was told by one of the line cooks that worked both shifts that so many suds poured out of the machine that he had resorted to trying to hose them out, which only made more. Soon he was running back and forth knee-deep in dish suds and water, and try as he might, he couldn't wash them down the floor drain because I had fixed that up special for him. Surprisingly, there were no consequences for us from management. Apparently, the restaurant owner even had a pretty good laugh about it. All I can say is that we never again got more than one tub of leftover lunch dishes to do before dinner rush. Story 42. My partner Roxy, lesbian for context, is an unhealthy level of jealous and an equally unhealthy level of unreliable. We have never had any issue with infidelity to warrant this, unless you include her texting her exes for an ego boost every so often. We've been together nearly a decade, and in the last 2 months alone she has missed or stood me up on several occasions, at least once a week. And if she's turned up, it's between 1 to 2 hours late. This includes a wedding and my rainbow baby niece's first birthday. If she's missed it, I've had to deal with explosive arguments about going with mutual friends instead, and how I spend time with everyone else. I'm always leaving early, and always go with friends she wouldn't feel threatened by. Mutual friends are actually her friends I've made friends with, as she's not keen on mine. I have denied, cried, shouted, bargained, begged, and finally reached acceptance that she will never be a reliable partner, and that she has no interest in attending things that don't directly benefit or interest her. This weekend is no different. I put a small, intimate wedding in her calendar in July, verbally confirmed with her, and 3 days beforehand, Roxy lets me know she's double booked with a flaky local school friend this week. There's not actually even a clash. She's meeting her friend in the evening for games. It's an alcohol-free morning wedding an hour away. The bride is understandably irritated. She's catered for one extra person who has effectively just decided she doesn't feel like it. Here's where I get petty. I've asked my old uni housemate, Alice, who lives in the area, to fill my already catered for +1 spot. Alice is straight as an arrow, but Alice is also charismatic career woman and a part-time model, and she looks it. Alice attends film premieres for work. Anyway, I'm gonna be in for hell when I get home. But that's fine, because I've booked the midnight train back. Brancos. Roxy mistakenly thought I would cancel or come back early to clean up the house and sort food for her and her friend tonight. Story 43. My partner is a professional musician. One of her bandmates' mother had dementia and lived in memory care for many years before she died. One bandmate's dad, Rob, came to many shows. While his wife was in memory care, Rob met a new friend, Linda, and started bringing her to shows. Linda talked Rob into giving her son his car and caused other financial and family drama. Bandmates sought therapy to deal with the frustration and anger of seeing them in the audience while trying to perform. The first time I met her, I said, "Nice to meet you, Marilyn." She corrected me. I saw her a few months later and said, "Hello, Lorna." Someone tapped my shoulder and I turned away before she said anything. When bandmate posted about his beloved mother's death, people responded saying they had met her last month, or that they watched her dance with Rob. I had to tell several friends that the woman they saw was Rob's companion, not bandmate's mom. I saw her once or twice a year. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Luann. Hello, Melinda. Petty and satisfying. At Rob's funeral, I showed great restraint by avoiding her instead of calling her, "See you next Tuesday." Story 44. I have a grandson. I'll call him Sam, 14. We've been pretty close through the years. Since he was just a few months old, my husband and I have kept him overnight, taken him on weekend trips, watched him for several days at a time while his parents vacationed, etc. Even when we had to move a few hours away, he'd come visit for 2 or 3 nights a few times a year. His parents divorced, and as he became an adolescent, he became withdrawn and distant. But I found that he seemed to love to hear stories of the hilarious things he'd said and done when he was little. He would sit and listen and be engaged with me for at least a while. I've tried hard to keep a connection without being pushy. He's been playing sports for years, and we make it to at least a game or 2 per sport each season to see him play. He'd come give you a hug after each game. My stepdaughter, his mom, told me she was amazed that he would hug me in public. I was the only person he'd hug at his games, including her. I was pretty proud of this, but it almost came to an end after one game last summer. My husband and I showed up, and Sam was very happy to see us. After the game, he ran out, and as he gave me a hug, I heard a nearby voice. "Look, everyone! Isn't that sweet? Sam's hugging his grandma." Hey. I felt Sam tense up and he immediately ended the hug. I was not going to let that little turd ruin those special hugs, so I turned to the kid who taunted Sam, grabbed him in a bear hug, and exclaimed, "Oh, are you jealous? You must need a grandma hug too." The kid just stood there stunned for a couple seconds, long enough for a couple of Sam's friends to start in, "Jake, get your own grandma." "Dude, you're creepy." He turned beet red and ran off. We heard through my stepdaughter that Jake was kind of a jerk, who always found reasons to pick on his teammates, and Sam and his friends thought what I did to him was hilarious. So far, Sam still gives me hugs. Grandma hug for the win. Story 45. Okay, so I really hate scammers. I know everyone does, but I've been scammed out of thousands of dollars, so there's a special hatred in my heart for them. I've been messing with one for the past few hours, and it has been absolutely glorious. I got a scam email a couple hours ago saying something about a PayPal receipt from me buying an iPhone. It had an amount number that I supposedly paid, and an invoice number. I don't even have a PayPal account, but I also just knew by looking at it that it was a scam email. Unfortunately for the scammer, they put their phone number on the email as the number to call to ask about your PayPal transaction. I saw my opportunity. I called the number and made up a story about how I'd ordered this phone and had gotten the PayPal receipt, but I didn't see a tracking number or a confirmation of the order address, so I was calling to see if there's any way they could tell me when I could expect my package. Scammer took the bait. He introduced himself as Austin and asked me for the invoice number on the email, which I gave, knowing it was a completely fake number. He then asked me how much my receipt was for, like how much I'd paid. I said confusedly, "Shouldn't you already know? Aren't you looking at the invoice?" And he told me the invoice number I'd given was invalid. I said that seemed odd, because it was the one listed on my receipt I'd gotten. Immediately he got defensive and said, "If you don't believe this is real, just hang up and don't call back." And he hung up on me. I called back. The person who answered the phone sounded like the same voice, but I wasn't 100% sure. He introduced himself as Frank. I started in on my plan, and I said, "Hi, I'm just calling because the person I spoke to before hung up on me, and it was very unprofessional. He said, "I think it was me you were talking to, ma'am." I said, "I think you're right." He asked why I was calling back, and I said that I was very offended by how he'd treated me, and that hanging up on customers was unprofessional, and I'd like to speak to his superior. He declined, but before he could finish his sentence, I said, "If this is a real business, you'd let me speak to your manager, so I'd like to do that now, please." He told me not to call back, and he hung up again. Called back immediately. He said, "This is PayPal," and he introduced himself as Austin again. I said, "Oh, so you're Austin again now? Not Frank?" And he said in a very defeated voice, "Yes, ma'am," which was hilarious to me, although I suspect he didn't really realize what he just admitted to. He then stated swearing at me and demanding that I never call him back. So of course y'all know what I did. I called back 3 more times, changing my voice every time, but he knew it was me. He continued to yell and swear at me, but I figured as long as I keep him on the line, he can't scam other people, right? It's been like 2 hours now, and I call him back every few minutes. He took the bait about 5 minutes ago and introduced himself as Austin from PayPal again, and I started banging pots and pans for about a minute and a half. He swore again. It's been incredible, honestly. I'll probably continue to call him and save his number in my phone for when I'm bored and want to make a scammer feel a small part of the way I felt when I got scammed. Story 46. I took my kiddo to Waffle House for a late Christmas breakfast. We get seated and start discussing what we're going to order, only to be interrupted by the guy at the table behind me making a FaceTime call at full blast. For the uninitiated, the booth seats in Waffle House are back-to-back, with no gap or dividers, so you're pretty close to the people seated behind you. Hoping this was just a temporary annoyance, I tried to ignore it, but after a few more minutes of not being able to hold a conversation, it was obvious my kid was nearing sensory overload, as was I. We're both high-functioning autistic. I lean over the guy's shoulder until I'm fully in frame of his video. He turns, we make eye contact, I raise my eyebrows and give him a look while motioning at his phone. He barely skipped a beat, rolled his eyes, and turned back, and went back to his call, just as loud as before. I figured if I had to be overloaded, that music would be marginally better than listening to his cackling, buzzy phone conversation, so I placed my phone on the back of the seats, between me and the guy, and put Christmas music on, then slowly started turning the volume up until it was just obnoxious enough to disrupt his conversation. It worked. He made a comment to the other person that he had to go and would call them back later. Hung up, we exchanged another dirty look as I turned my music off, and we all enjoyed our meals in peace. Story 47. This happened a few years ago. I live in a very nice, landmarked neighborhood. Everyone is pretty respectful except one neighbor. It's passed. It was a Saturday at the end of June. This person, she was a judge, mind you, was making a graduation party for her daughter. Starting at 11 a.m. The music was so loud my windows were shaking. I live only a few houses away from her. She walked past my house as I was sitting on the porch and asked if the music was too loud. I said it was a bit loud, thinking she would turn it down. "Nope," sighed. She shrugged at me and with a smirk walked back to her house. This went on until past midnight. Loud music, guests all over the street yelling. Police finally came by and shut her down. I am an early riser, and I was up that Sunday morning at 6 a.m. to feed the neighborhood homeless cats. All over my lawn and everyone else's lawn, including around the corner there was garbage. Plates, cups, plastic cutlery, and partially eaten food. It was disgusting, and it was starting to drizzle. So I went inside, got myself a garbage bag, and proceeded to collect all the garbage. It practically filled a 13-gallon bag. And now it was raining. Once the neighborhood was clean, I walked to her front lawn and dumped the entire bag onto her property. And now it was pouring rain. Waste of time. She complained to a neighbor that someone dumped garbage on her lawn in the rain. She wanted to know who did it. The neighbor told her she had no idea who did it, but her party was loud and her guests were disrespectful. So what did she really expect? And she never found out who it was, too. She never had a loud party again. Winking face. 48. Short but satisfying to me. My partner and I are existing in 2 different houses at the moment. I'm out of state doing care for my sick uncle, and have been for about a year. My partner, who we'll call Becky, drives down when she can. It's tough on her, but she's a trooper. She keeps our house running and helps my elderly mother daily. I have an entitled narcissist aunt who thought it was a fine idea to mail a Christmas card to 333 and Amy. I don't know any Amy's, but my non-Amy partner sent me a picture of the card tagged with, "Lucy, you got some splaining to do now." My aunt is hard of hearing, so we figured she's just misheard her name in the many times they've interacted. Laugh it off, no harm, no foul. Until she showed my mom, who said, "Now, yes, I told her that wasn't your name, but she said, 'Enf, Close enough, it's the thought that counts. Not really. I started thinking about when my aunt comes to town, she drags my partner into driving her around, finding hotels, and lots of little serve me kind of grunt work. She knows Becky's name well enough at those times. Okay. I bought a Christmas card to send back, and my aunt is Eileen, and I happily addressed it to Ellen and included it inside the card message too. I so wanted her to call me so I could call her BS, but she's been oddly quiet. I think she got the message because I told my mom what I did and exactly why, and they talk all the time. Not big noisy revenge, but satisfyingly petty to let her know her dismissive crap isn't acceptable, especially when she knows her name, when it's convenient for her. Story 49. Just up front. This ain't my story, but I've been holding it in for quite some time. Dunno if it qualifies. I hope it does. We all know how almighty the local law enforcement staff can feel, and how they sometimes punch down on people, especially minorities. Take solace, friends, in knowing a friend of mine ruined one's career open-mouthed smile. I know that was a vengeful entrance. Please be gentle with me. Sometime back, an old colleague and friend of mine was working as a truck driver, pushing around sea containers. Now, I don't know which laws apply to which country, but here in Germany, only the customer may break the seal on one of those. IF customs procedure has been done beforehand. Dunno how that works. OR if the customs office explicitly grants you permission to open and unload, which they of course also can deny/withhold. Mind you, it's just opening and unloading. Paperwork would still have to be done, and the customs office can block the goods, for whatever reason, or even drop by, even unannounced, to inspect the goods. Did I say only? Nah. OR. The customs officers themselves can break the seal to inspect the goods, for whatever reason they see fit. Cue the new policeman in the local department, a youngster trying to earn his stars and stripes,